Welcome to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast with your host, Luke Corletto, where you will be supported to remember that you are the driver and not the vehicle, so that you can walk your life in trust. Welcome back to the Tao Living podcast, the Art of Living. My guest for today was a career Army officer, a devoted husband and father, who spent 45 years serving his country in elite units like the Army's Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii. With more than 24 deployments to places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Kosovo, the Philippines, and Haiti, he witnessed the effects of extreme human suffering around the world firsthand. In 2018, when John Paul, or JP deLange, was diagnosed with the worst kind of PTSD, he was in denial. How could this happen to me, he wondered. But simultaneously, he saw it as a gift. Thoughts of PTSD never entered his mind. Vietnam vets got PTSD. People that engage in combat get PTSD. Not me. That's what he thought until he learned more about it. Now, as a certified high-performance coach and a radical forgiveness coach, he's deeply committed to excellence in helping people dig deeper into achieving consistently higher levels of fulfillment, success, and life satisfaction. He studied the neuroscience of PTSD. He has researched psychology, physiology, and spirituality to understand what happens in the mind and body when we experience a traumatic event. He explored the social impacts, public policy, and stigmas surrounding PTSD. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Tao Living Podcast, The Art of Living. And I'm really honored to have my next guest speaker and presenter to bring his wisdom and his heart. And as you've heard in his bio, I was just joking with him before we went live that, well, joking but serious, when I read them, like, there must be a typo here. 45 years of service to this country and in the military at high levels. And I just discovered that he's just recently retired 10 days ago. So again, once again, congratulations on your retirement, sir. And thank you for the decades of high-level service to this country. Thank you.
Lou, it's so great to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy you're here because it's always selfish, right? And I pick the guests that I want to pick their brains and discover and unpack, and hopefully the audience gets to benefit from that, right? So it's a win-win for service. And so to the listening audience, I just recently met JP. We were on a recertification training and something called Certified High Performance, right? So this is a profound process of helping people through the process of life fulfillment and joy and energy and courage and all these beautiful capacities dealing with psychology and physiology, high performance, right? Because we can all do peak performance, but high performance is consistency, right? How do we achieve it? It sounds great, but how do we achieve it? So we're both certified in this process, and we happened to be in a breakout room. And in the breakout room, I was the recipient and JP was the coach. And as he was leading me through the process, I was like, ooh, there's something about this guy. So I took notes on my paper outside of how he was serving me, going, I'm going to reach out and ask him to be on the show. Hence the connection and hence the invitation. So that was the feedback to the listening audience on how we first connected. Because of your again, we had no connection, right? Here's training. We got thrown into a breakout group on Zoom, and you start just dialing into questions because you were listening, because you were present to what I said. You extrapolated pieces beyond the depth of the words that I shared and went right to it. I went, oh, I like this. This man's a player. He's on board. So that's what piqued my interest.
Thank you so much. It just goes to show you there are no accidents. Things happen for a reason. It was the first time we met, and it just worked super well. It was one of the best breakouts I experienced that whole week. So we talk about sustained levels of joy and happiness and success in life. That's why we're high performance coaches. And I think I shared with you there, it had to have been, it was the first time we met. I'm also a radical forgiveness coach. And I kind of have combined radical forgiveness with high performance habits and something called infinite possibilities
Hmm.
to create the model that I'm working with veterans on. So again, I'm thrilled to be here to talk with you about it.
Thank you, sir. So, yes, sir. That's the other piece as well, which is as soon as you introduce yourself as that component, radical forgiveness coach, because I know I'm familiar with Colin Tippen's work, right?
Yeah.
So, listening audience, there's a beautiful body of work by the gentleman named Colin Tippen called Radical Forgiveness. And JP is also a certified coach in this process, and it's an incredible process. So then I'm like, if he's dove into that to become so obviously using the work personally is one thing. Becoming certified as a coach means he's now using this to serve others. So this is just my deduction, right? And those were the other components going, okay, I really want him on the show so we can unpack this. Because then I was going, why, right? So for me as a healing practitioner, what puts anybody in their body of work, right? What is that call? And it's usually because something surfaced for us that puts us down that hole to then become excellent in that, because not only does it serve us, we get to use it to serve others, right? If I'm articulating that. So on that note, to help people understand why you do what you do now as a high level coach with all of these skill sets, plus what you've brought from the military for 45 years.
Yeah.
What caused all that, right? What's your story that opened up this entire process? And then I really want you to share some of the stats that unfortunately that are happening in our country right now with the military, right? That's unacceptable.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Lou. It was a calling for me. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD in 2018. That was 11 years after I retired from active duty. I still work for the Defense Department, for the military. But it was, by accident that I discovered that I had symptoms. And not only did I have symptoms, but I'd probably been walking around with them for almost 3 decades by the time I was diagnosed. And that made me wonder, why wasn't I checked before for the presence of traumatic stress when I left the military? Why did I have to kind of figure it out and discover it on my own? And how many other veterans are there out there that are oblivious to the fact that they are carrying around symptoms? Because for me, once I started understanding what the symptoms are, because we're not trained in the military about what PTSD is, how it happens to us, how it shows up, what the signs are to look for. Once I dove in and started to learn about this, suddenly answers started to come to me about why I was the way I was throughout the better part of my life. And as I got treatment for it and started to apply what I learned as a radical forgiveness coach to my healing, so there was regular treatment through the military system for my PTSD, but I also added personal development on top of that. I really began to see amazing progress in my life, not only for myself personally, but in my marriage. My marriage, it really saved my marriage, to be honest with you, and we're thriving today. And the more success that I saw, the more I wanted to share it with others. So, in 30 years, I deployed more than 24 times around the world, saw a lot of human suffering. The last 15 years of my career, I was with an organization called JIDO, the Joint Improvised Explosive Device Defeat Organization, which was dedicated toward reducing the effects of roadside bombs, which were the primary means of attack against our service members in Iraq and Afghanistan. I saw a lot of bad stuff over there, and it took a toll on me. I had no idea. There were, members of the military take great pride in being able to function on 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night for long periods of time, for years at a time. Very high operational tempo, high pace of how we work. under always high stress, often very high stress environments. And what we don't realize is the emotional and the physical toll that takes on us, on our bodies over time. And so, since we're not checked for it when we leave the service and we don't get training for it, so we don't know how to recognize it, we have experiences in life that eventually drive us to discovering things. And so it was very much by accident in 2018. I discovered that I had issues. I went to see somebody about it, and to my surprise, I was stunned. You have PTSD, and these are your symptoms. I have about a dozen of the symptoms of them, and so that's kind of my story there. But I saw it as a gift eventually, because healing came after that, and also answers to many of life's questions that I had for a long time started to come to me too, which I'm sure others share as well in their experience.
JP, thank you for that. And I'd like to just to bring in, so for the listening audience, a couple things I'd like to bring out. If you're hearing this and you're hearing, well, I was never in the service, this episode's not going to pertain to me, please don't do that. This is where he has spent his life. But remember, the story that's similar for all of us is we're all human first, right? Yeah. No matter what our vocation is. And I'd like to really, which JP will do it even better in a second, my perspective of PTSD. And we had this conversation briefly before we went live, or before I hit the record button. And that is, I'm not a fan of the full title in the sense of the way it's projected, PTSD. It's the D part. So for those who might not even know the acronym, right? PTSD means post-traumatic stress disorder. It's the disorder part that I don't like. And for people who've been listening to the show, they know that because I'm not a fan of labels, because then it puts it into a condition and I'm a victim and yada, yada, yada. And it's just it's not healthy. So, but the first three letters are 100% accurate. And I just want to slightly tweak them for people. Because if like, well, I was never in the military and I didn't see my friends die with a roadside bomb, right? Their body parts didn't land on me and I didn't have my world rocked. Fair enough. And thank goodness most of us don't have to do that. But post-traumatic stress, so let's just real simply, post means after. Trauma, that's a relative term, because what's traumatic to me might make you laugh and kill someone else. Right? It's how we engage with this thing and how it shows up in our life, which JP will unpack for sure. And yeah, so quite frankly, is when anything that showed up in our life, which was too challenging for us to handle in the moment, that is post-traumatic stress. It was too much. Divorce, fired from a job after 30 years and not having a retirement. Losing all the money, with the financial crash in 2008, when I thought I was retired, now I have to go back to work when my whole, and then all the way up the scale into violence and death, right? So sexual attacks, bullying in elementary school and middle school, right? High level bullying. So these are all serious expressions of
absolutely
traumatic stress that the mind, the psyche, and the nerve system has not been able to handle or integrate, and it just runs in there, looping and looping and looping, causing then the varied symptoms that we then tend to express, right? And there's ways out, hence the point of this show. So I'll pass the ball back to you, sir. How do you take what you know now of all the tools, right? So from coaching to definitely radical forgiveness, and anything you want to add to that or clean up, please.
Oh, you did great. I always thought that war was one of the only ways post-traumatic stress shows up. And the only way you could get it is if you had direct contact with the enemy. If you were firing your weapon and you got fired at. That is a stereotype. That is an assumption that a lot of people make. And it's just false. Mm-hmm. There's such a thing called secondary PTSD, which I probably have from my wartime experience. I mean, I've been in plenty of combat situations, but never been in a firefight. So I never thought that this could happen to me until I started to learn more about it. And I learned, there are a lot of stigmas associated with. When we call something a disorder, well, we don't want a disorder. We don't want to admit that we've got a disorder. I don't see it that way either, Lou. It's really not a disorder at all. I love what Gabor Mate, how he characterizes traumatic stress. He calls it a wound, and I completely agree. It's a wound that leaves an imprint on your nervous system, and it's kind of an unresolved wound. It's an unhealed wound. That's so great. We bury it down inside of ourselves just to keep functioning in our environment. So it leaves an imprint on our nervous system, and then it shows up later in our life in inconvenient and unhelpful ways. And that's kind of an elegant way of saying when we get triggered, it that wound shows up again. But I like to characterize post-traumatic stress as a wound, because it's not about the event. It's not about being in a wartime situation or being in a horrific traffic accident or a natural disaster or the victim of sexual assault or witnessing somebody die. It's not about that event. It's about what happens inside of you as a result of either being a direct participant or witnessing that event. And there's very good news in that. And the good news is, if it's about what's happening inside of me, I can do something about that. And I think that's the part of this, that we need to get more into the mainstream in terms of our conversation of our overall health. If we can see post-traumatic stress as a wound that we can do something about and heal over time, there's a lot of hope for people out there. But as it is, the stigma that society has placed on PTSD, just because they don't understand what it really is. I didn't understand it, and most of society doesn't. As long as that stigma is around, it stays in the dark. And to me, in my research has told me one of the predominant emotions associated with PTSD is shame, which is one of the lowest vibrational emotions on Hawkins' scale. And with that shame, we have no desire to seek help. We're afraid of being labeled. We're afraid of being isolated. We're afraid of being seen as a failure by our family, by our friends. Those of us that are still on active duty or in government service are afraid of losing their security clearances or losing their jobs altogether. It's that stigma that is preventing a more healthy discussion and a healthy response to this, because treatment works, it's effective, and I think the more education that we can provide to communities, but also the business communities as well, how to spot it in the workplace, the faster we can start healing.
Beautiful.
I believe it's an epidemic in our country. It shows up in our mass shootings. It's there before it happens, and it's there afterward. It happens as part of, it's not only an individual challenge, but it's a cultural challenge too, as we've seen with some of the cultural challenges we have in America. And so it's all around us. We owe it to ourselves to talk about it.
Beautiful. JP, thank you so much for that eloquent description. And for me, this because of the world that I live in empowering people from the different paradigm around healing, because our so-called healthcare system, there's no health in the care. It's all crisis based, and it's yes. driven as the ultimate model, and it's horrendous. And I say that from the places because, case in point for the listening audience, the concept of we wait to treat crime in the electric chair, but not in the high chair, right? Meaning we're not, as JP just talked about, we need to, like the school shootings. So this is prevalent. As he says, it's an epidemic. This is a real epidemic. And I'm not going to go on my soapbox about the last couple of years, but that's also a form of PTSD, right? Isolation and lockdown and look what losing businesses and all of it that surfaced, right? The amount of domestic violence that occurred because people were locked in together who had wounds that are not healed, because we live in an environment in our so-called healthcare system that's all about sedation, but we can't heal what we can't feel.
Absolutely.
Right? And so it's imperative to bring this up in order to address it. And I would like to just add my two little pieces around this powerful point. And I love that you love David Hawkins' work. So that was, I smiled as soon as you said, I'm like, ooh, Hawkins. He's a Hawkins fan.
Yeah.
And so, ladies and gentlemen listening, right? So for me, when I first discovered this concept in my own work, I was like, oh, like my personal work, guilt and shame, right? So guilt is I've done something bad, right? But shame is I am bad.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
heavy.
affected.
That's heavy, right?
Yeah.
So when I'm running a pattern that I'm bad, well, then if I'm bad, I don't even deserve to get well. Like it
Exactly.
runs that deep in my system. So anybody that's listening, if that's running in your system, take a breath, a real big one, and probably a couple more, and start eradicating that, because that's a lie. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not bad. Yet you might have experienced something that was so unpleasant that you made a story that it was on you, right? And so that's part of the healing, is cleaning up that aspect.
Amen.
And as JP said, it's time for us to bring it to the surface, right? Stop hiding, because we can't heal if we keep hiding. And so, sir, what avenues do you help bring people forth? Like, how do we bring people out of the shadows to let them know not only is it okay, it's essential, right? No matter what and I love that. It's not the event, it's what we've chosen, right? It's what our psyche, our body, our nerve system, everything here's the experience, but what did I decide about the experience, right? And to know there's a way out, and there's a lot of beautiful tools.
Yes, yes, there are. And I'll just add too, another element here is something called generational pain,
Mm,
where, my parents were kids in World War II. Back in World War II, PTSD wasn't even a thing, but they called it shell shock. And so many millions of people were affected by that war. There were no services available. You had to, military term here, you had to suck it up and carry on there, or you were just labeled as weak in society. So you had no choice. Well, all that trauma has energy around it. It has to go somewhere. And if you don't deal with it in one generation, guess what? They pass it on to the next one. And that's how I took on some of my
mm,
traumatic stress. But eventually, my path led me to Colin Tipping's work in radical forgiveness. I did a couple of workshops with him and felt so much relief, because I learned, as we're growing up, our primary caretakers, the people that raise us, they do the best they can. There's no manual for it. They do the best they can, and they pass along their own narrative to us on how they view life and how we should view life. But that narrative, as we learn in radical forgiveness, is a false narrative.
mm,
But it's a narrative that we repeat to ourselves again and again and again until it becomes our identity. And with that identity come core beliefs, core disempowering beliefs that get us into that mindset of I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. My problem, my trauma is unique. Nobody's going to understand me. And what do people want more than anything else? They want to be understood, valued, respected, and appreciated. And folks that are dealing with traumatic stress, they hunger for that so much, but their fear of exposing themselves to judgment, if they were to share, if they were to be vulnerable for a moment and share their trauma as they seek support, is sometimes too great. And so I love working with clients with radical forgiveness and listening to their stories, because everybody's story is valid. Feeling the feelings is where we struggle so much. It's a second stage of radical forgiveness, but feeling the feelings is so important. You said it yourself. You cannot heal what you do not feel. And so, with trauma comes a lot of pain that is asking for expression. And as we move through these stages, I help the folks I work with start to identify some of the core beliefs that they have around their narrative, around their story, and then recognize, wait a minute, this isn't true. And if it isn't true and it's all inside of me, I can do something about it. I can change my narrative and I can start to level up my life. Everybody can do it, but very few people know how. And so it's a big task, but it's one that I embrace and I love to share with my community. And then, once we release the energy around all that negative thinking, that shame, that guilt, that grief and anger and fear, well, we have all this energy now that we've freed up. What do we do with it? Why don't we just redirect it into high performance habits and start creating new habits and a new narrative for our life, to take us wherever we dream of going.
Brilliant.
It's just an exciting work for me.
Yeah, what transformation, right? So again, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to just unpack a couple beautiful gems that JP shared. One, that aspect of when we are hiding for whatever reason, the paradox is what I'm really desiring is connection. But the stories that I run in my head keep me isolated.
Oh, yeah.
And that disconnect creates the conflict that I keep experiencing and keep creating, right? Whoever's doing that. In this case, I'll put it on me. Cancel clear. I choose not to do that. And so, like, for those listening, if this is you personally or somebody in your family, please hear these words from the two of us. There is a way out of the darkness, right? And you are not alone. You just feel that way, right? First of all, it's impossible to be alone because you're always supported. However, however you want to unpack that. Yes. The feeling of isolation is an internal thought, but you're never alone. And so when JP talked about his the generational piece, so think about the time period when there was the school drills, right? So nuclear war, what do? Climb under the desk, kids. Like, so they drilled climbing under the desks for impending bombs, right? How about today? Today, 2023, they drill active shooters. Kids now, like, what do? Active shooter. Children are going to elementary school and middle school and high school who are training to be, right? So that threat is in their system every day. And so this whole concept of PTSD is in society and unfortunately being driven, right? So when we think we're not exposed to this, or you might not be experiencing this, remember, dump the D part. Well, for me, dump the D part, but trauma. And it might not be post, you might be actively in it. Yes. And as JP said, not recognize it, right? And so that's essential. Like, let's not make it okay, right? Let's stop tolerating. Let's quit making it okay, and let's start helping each other come out of this wound that some form or fashion we're all carrying.
I couldn't agree more, Lou. A promise to your audience: if you feel like whatever you're struggling with, whether it's a heartbreak from a relationship that broke up that was very important to you, whether it's struggling in your career with maybe your relationship with your boss, or maybe you were passed over for promotion, so you feel like something less, or you're just struggling with your health and well-being, or your relationships with your family. You are not alone, and it is not unique to you. There are people that are in your exact shoes that will completely understand and empathize with where you are. And I think that's what we're looking for more in our society these days, more empathy with each other, more compassion for what we're struggling with. And once you know that there are others out there that are struggling with the same kinds of things you are, suddenly that's such a burden that lifts off. And so I want to create a community of veterans and their family members, because we don't often talk enough about family members either that are affected by one of their family members that have PTSD. They often suffer and struggle more than the person that's struggling with it themselves. But I want to create a safe space for them to come and find and build a community where we recognize, oh my gosh, you're struggling with the same things that I am, and we can support each other that way and not feel alone, because isolation and loneliness are big factors that are keeping PTSD in the dark. And support each other's healing and personal development. I think that's an important factor in healing from this. We can do a lot by ourselves, but we can do so much more as a community together.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness. There's so much to continue unpacking from this. Yeah. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, as I was listening to JP share, I was just getting flashes of, like, over the last 35 years, the people that I've been blessed to serve who have taught me across the border from domestic violence, meaning trauma that we have experienced. Somebody in a car crash. I remember this one, he was 22 years old, and he came to me. He's already been treated for depression and all sorts of things. And we sat down, we had this conversation. He was in a car crash, and 3 of his friends died. He was the only survivor. And so the guilt that he carried, that why him? Why am I alive? Like, why did my friends die and I'm still alive? And that wrecked him. Like, he had no idea. He had, in his mind, he had no tools to process that trauma, and therefore did not have to re-enter into the world, right? He was a 22-year-old kid. Well, how about those 22-year-old kids, right? When I first worked with a high-level Vietnam vet, and he told me a story, right? He was playing ball one day, like throwing a ball with his friends. And, a month later, he's now shooting at people and being shot at, right? And across the border, right? So first responders, right? Police, firefighters who are put in these positions where, right? So when any of us as the human being experience something that causes the nerve system to go, that is trauma. We might not like the word, but it is, right? And until you do something to get that through your system, not just talk about it. Talk therapy is nice, but it doesn't have healing resolution. You've got to get it through the body, the cells of the body, the energy system, right? And so soon we're going to talk about tools, how to do that, right? And definitely reach out to JP, especially if you are a vet and a family member of active or retired service, right? Because that's his specialty, but it doesn't have to be. Anybody, right? So if you've got a pulse, reach out to JP.
Yeah, you bet.
Right? If you've got a pulse, this man's going to be able to help facilitate a life of fulfillment and success and satisfaction, right? To have that, right? I have lived my life fully. First and foremost, if you're challenged, let's get you out of survival and into thriving, right? Let's make that transformation.
Yes.
Yeah. So on that note, sir, what are tools that, so radical forgiveness, as you just unpacked the steps that you utilize to help people through that.
Yeah.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is a profound tool. It really is a process. I shouldn't call it a tool. It's a process. And the discovery, uncovery, and healing in this process is truly profound. And it's also quite efficient, right? Meaning this doesn't take 30 years of therapy to get to it, right? And so that's one of the pieces I love about it. It's like, let's get to it, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And look, I wouldn't be teaching this and coaching this. And I've got an online course that's coming out here in a few weeks on radical forgiveness. I wouldn't put so much effort into it if it was like akin to the kind of forgiveness that most people are probably kind of familiar with. We all kind of have our own idea of what forgiveness is, but I promise you, radical forgiveness is advanced forgiveness. The cool thing is it's very easy to learn, and it's about developing a habit, a process in your mind on how to process and work through things that happen to you, or things you think happen to you. Because it shifts the way you view your life once you understand it. And so for me, once I understood the principle of radical forgiveness, for me, it was so eye-opening that life doesn't happen to me. Life happens for me. And, we may have heard that said by other people before, but what that means to me is every experience that I have is meant to teach me something. Not only the bad experiences, the good ones too. You know, when I'm around people that juice me up, that get me excited. When I'm around you, Lou, and other high performance coaches, you know, that's a high energy environment, and I want more of that.
Mm-hmm.
That is teaching me something.
Mm-hmm.
But when I have, you know, relationship issues or career related issues, or I have health issues, there are lessons there too. That's life working for us and not to us. So it once you can accept that, it quickly takes you out of this victimhood mindset and sets you up for, you know, to become a victor in your life. And that's what it's all about. You can't go to the next level in your life when you're carrying around so much baggage from your past. So radical forgiveness is all designed to leave the past in the past, dissolve the emotions and the beliefs that you have about yourself, replace them with new ones that are more aligned with who we really are. You know, there's a wonderful quote that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience in a human body, and we'll become spiritual beings again. Radical forgiveness is really all about remembering who we really are and have always been. We tend to forget that as we live our life. This is a beautiful process for returning to that. So that's a tool that I love to use with folks.
100%. And that last piece that JP just shared is, so like that's the undercurrent theme of Tao Living podcast or My Body of Work, right? The art of living is when you remember that you're the driver, not the vehicle.
Yes.
You can walk your life in trust, right? And most of us have forgotten, right, who we really are. So my vernacular is who you be, right? Who you be. Yeah. So JP, and just briefly, because I don't want to feel like we're going down, I just want to talk about something that most people don't want to talk about, but it's essential because most people don't even know the stats. So let's bring that to the forefront. What's happening on a regular daily basis in this country to our veterans that most people do not know about?
Yeah, it was a statistic that shocked me. 22 veterans commit suicide every day in the United States. You know, over the next 10 days, that's 220 veterans that will take their lives. That's if you're familiar with military organizations, that's a company size element. You know, when the war started in Iraq right after 9/11, the VA started keeping statistics on suicides. That started in about 2005. There have been over 130,000 suicides by veterans since they started keeping that statistic in 2005. That's more deaths than all of the soldiers that landed on Normandy Beach on D-Day in 1944. It's a staggering statistic. And, you know, you have to wonder if there are 22 taking their lives a day, how many more are just on the bubble, just on the fence? And then how many family members do they have? And how many family members have been affected by this? So it's not just 22, it's hundreds and potentially thousands. Divorce rate among military is the highest of any profession in America, 60% divorce rate. Trauma from sexual assault, 55% of women in the military have experienced it, 38% of men. You know, it's a difficult profession. There's a lot of reward. I loved almost every minute I was in uniform. But it's such an amazing career that allows you to become the best version of yourself that you can be, if you make the most of it. But there are hazards too, and we need to become more aware of that so we can respond in a way that starts to bring these numbers under control. We've been working many years to try to do that, and the VA, Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, others, Homeland Security, they're kind of befuddled on those statistics. But I think that's because we're trying to treat the effects. We're not treating the cause, the root. We're not getting after the root cause, and we need to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and that's where my charge comes in, is because we're still using the same healthcare model, which is sedate, right? Like, here, let's take this pill, and you can't heal what you can't feel, right? So,
Exactly.
well, obviously it doesn't work. So I just want to recap for everybody that's listening. Like, it's hard for, um, like I put myself, moving the metaphor a second, to hear certain numbers financially. Like, what is $1 million? What is $1 billion? Like, what is $1 trillion? Like, I understand the word intellectually, but I've never held $1 million or $1 billion in my hands.
Mhm.
I have no reference point or trillion. So I literally sat down one day and like did this wacky math to get a concept, and meaning to make it more real for me, right? Otherwise, it was just this esoteric number. And the difference just between a billion and a trillion. So a billion, I would have to spend $1 every second, every day for 32 years. So every second, every day, every year for 32 years straight. That's a billion. A trillion, I'd have to do that for 31,000 years.
Wow.
So just between billion and trillion, the jump between 32 years and 31,000 years, I'd have to spend $1 every second, every hour, every day, every week, every year for 31,000 years, right? That helped me get a concept of like how big that is. 22 people, veterans. Now, these are folks who were trained in the military to have a different mindset, right? They're given skill sets to handle adverse situations that the civilians, we don't. And when they return, it's so intense that they feel like they can't integrate, where they end up taking their own lives. Every day, not once in a while, 22 every day. That's like, why isn't this on the news every single day? Like previous stories of epidemics. That's an epidemic, right? These are soldiers coming home and not being able to cope with reentry. And the feeling that the only way out is to end it. And like JP said, that's the ones that we know that are doing it. How about the ones that are struggling in the shadows? That's even has to be more than 22, right? And then that ripple effect that's hammering families, because they're now having to handle somebody who's not dealing well with life, right? And this is like, whoa, right? So the models. Now here's the great part. I work with some high level teachers and instructors, and they haven't embraced it on a large scale because I'm just going to speak frankly. It's free, the tool, and it competes with big pharma, right? Which is right now the accepted way to treat this. Breath, right? They've discovered that breath is the greatest way to bring out high level military in PTSD, not just to resolve the stress, to bring them back online. Different breath techniques. Breath, like, oh no, it can't be. Yeah, right. I preach about it all the time. So, and so we have all of these amazing tools: radical forgiveness, breath, right? Mindfulness techniques. There's a lot of tools. We just got to get them into the hands of the people that need them.
Yep. And to me, it's all about education. I take your point, Lou. Breath is readily available to us, and it's the easiest way we have. It's the easiest thing we have access to regulate our nervous system, and that's really where trauma lives. Where that wound, that psychological wound that we suffered at some point in our past, it lives in our nervous system. If we can learn how to breathe properly, we can help ourselves that way. And stay a little bit further away from the edge. That's progress.
Yeah, and because I've worked with some folks, so I just want to be clear for the listening audience. Again, so like exercise, we can use it to rehab an injury, or we can use it for wellness, right? It's a tool, but how do we use it, right? So breath, most people, what I call biological breath, we're just inhaling and exhaling unconsciously to stay alive, because humans don't have to think about breath, right? Mm-hmm. We have involuntary aspects. And so listening audience is, you've heard me preach about this before, but I'm going to do it again. When we learn to volitionally, meaning intentionally, now use our breath consciously, and there's various ways, and there are some that'll just help reduce the intensity right now. Yeah, and that's great. And it's free and it's there at your access. but there's also different versions that can help create resolution, not just keep handling stuff when life gets intense. All that means is you're just going clinical, subclinical, but there's no resolution, right? We're talking about resolution. Let's get resolution, because then we've healed and now we can truly thrive, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, you can hear it, my tone. This is a passionate topic. Is
For both
empowering,
of us.
right? Is empowering people to, like, you've been lied to. There is a way out, right? And there are other ways. And JP's a master at this process. So, sir, what nuggets would you like to leave the listening audience? Like, what couple pieces would you like to leave them with? And then, ladies and gentlemen, in the show notes, of course, we'll have JP's contact information. Reach out to him. He's got a couple assessments there. Like, do you have indicators of post-traumatic stress in your system? And then there's ways that you can reach out to work with him as well, right? So please, click those links and check this man out and allow him to be of service. But in the meantime, sir, what nuggets and what gems would you like to leave the listening audience with?
Thanks, Lou. When I first was diagnosed and started to understand this community more, I learned a lot of people think this is a life sentence. It's not. You can thrive even with traumatic wounds that are in your body. It's a practice to coexist with it, but it's a practice to heal yourself with it. Healing is all about becoming whole again. And I know there's wholeness that can be achieved with anybody, for anybody that's got PTSD. I do have a checklist out on my website that's available. If you haven't been diagnosed, but you think you have some of the symptoms, I urge you to at least get yourself into that checklist. It's an indicator of the potential presence of trauma inside of you. And if you've got if trauma is inside of you, I strongly recommend that you get yourself checked out by a professional. You do not have to live with this by yourself. There is treatment available that works, and the more people that help to bring this into the light and make it mainstream, I think we can change the narrative in our country for the better around good mental health, so that we can, just as we cut ourselves or scrape ourselves, our skin every once in a while, and we look at it as something normal, we can treat the trauma that we experience from time to time as just something normal. It's a wound that is asking to be healed. Let's get after that, and we can do this together, one person at a time, and change the narrative in the country. And that's what I'm working to do here, Lou. So thank you.
My friend, thank you for, and so again, ladies and gentlemen, just know, as you can, those who are listening to the podcast, and as a side note, soon this video version will also be on the YouTube. I haven't been utilizing that yet, so soon, within the next couple of weeks, the YouTube version of these video interactions and interviews will be on there live. So for those who are listening to the interview with audio only, you can hear the sincere, service-driven heart of this man. Hence the 45 years in the service, right? And now he's taking that same high-end service to continue to be of service to vets and their families, but also to anybody in humanity, to help us all heal, right? And he and I were talking beforehand, right? One of us alone can't do this, but all of us together can, right? And JP is doing his part at a high level. So reach out to this man and enter his world and see what he has to offer, right? And this last piece, because it's I'm being nagged to say it, especially from the male ego. If you look at this checklist and you start to see things that you identify with, but you hear the other voice going, no, 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 that means you're still hiding, wanting to hide, right? And I say this stereotypically, right? From the male ego is that, oh, then I'm weak. If I have something like this, then I'm weak and I can't do that. That's just your ego talking, right? Get that stuff out of the way and just allow the truth to be there. Hey, life's not working right now. Like, let's just get real, right? Let's get honest. At the moment, life's not working so good. Great. Let's bring that to the table. Remember, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You've just got some stuff that's it's corrupted the software, right? We can clean up the software and bring you back online so you can re-engage at even a better level than you were before, right? We're not going to get you back to where you were, even better, right? Thriving. So thank you for JP. Thank you for being here to share your wisdom, to share your heart, and to let people know, the call to action. Let's bring this to the surface as a society, actually as a world, people really, because of the amount of violence in the world right now, right? Woo! So we can all start to heal as a people. Yeah. Because at the highest levels, none of us can be whole until all of us heal.
You bet.
Right. So thank you for your time and presence, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. And please, especially this episode, share it. People need to hear this, right? Put this in people's ears, because there's a lot of people out there that are feeling isolated and alone, and they don't think there's a way out. And there is, right? Let's get them back into the light. Abundant blessings, and until next time, peace. Thank you for tuning in to the Tao Living Podcast, The Art of Living. Now go to loucorletto.com, LOUCORLETO.com, to receive your free training, the operator's manual for your vehicle. See, when you buy a phone, you get a manual. When you buy a car, you get a manual. When you entered your body, no manual. Let me teach you how it's really designed to work. Also, help me help others and share this podcast far and wide. And subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, abundant blessings.